This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Stay tuned to find out how you can get Surfshark for 85% off and get 3 extra months for free. Back in 2005, WWE held ECW One Night Stand. It was a big nostalgia-packed love letter to the ghost of ECW, which had closed 4 years earlier, and it turned out to be a much bigger success financially and critically than I think the company ever could have foreseen. It was an idea that was first pitched by Rob Van Dam after the success of the Rise and Fall of ECW DVD, and it did very well. And I've reviewed that show on this channel in the past. You can go check that out right here. But not only was the show so successful in a bubble as like this nostalgia act, it was so popular that 1 year later the company decided, hey, let's revive ECW as a third brand, and we'll use the sequel, One Night Stand 2006, as the launching pad, the jumping off point for this new brand. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of ECW as a third brand. I did a video about that many moons ago, several years ago, and one of these days I might revisit it at some point, but I don't want to get into that whole trauma right now. The point is, though, this was, like I mentioned, the jumping off point. ECW One Night Stand 2006 from June 11th of that year at the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York City. This show was nominated by Jesse Wallace, Mikey F., Mysterio 99, and John Araya Garcia. So with ECW being revived, they gave them the works. They had a draft, they had their own TV show on the Sci-Fi Network, on cable. So whereas, last year's One Night Stand, big nostalgia show. This one in 2006 was, like I mentioned, the jumping off point for this third brand. See, there's a kind of a mix of the old and the new. We still have the cool venue of the Hammerstein Ballroom. We still have some of the original ECW talent being signed to this new version, but there is a distinct WWE flavor permeating throughout, especially this 06 iteration. But would the show be successful in front of the hardcore New York fans? We're about to find out. 2,460 folks packed the Hammerstein Ballroom. This show got 280,000 pay-per-view buys, down a bit from 325,000 the previous year. Paul Heyman opens the show, a massive ovation for the evil genius. He goes, "The tribe of extreme has risen again." That soundbite would play on the opening of ECW's weekly show for quite a while. Heyman puts over that they're on pay-per-view. They're coming back to national television once again with a much better deal than the last one they had on TNN. Heyman thanks the fans because it was they who helped bring ECW back from the dead. And then Heyman lists off a whole bunch of nicknames for himself. He calls himself the Messiah of the New Breed Unleashed, the Rabbi of the Revolution, the Swinging Schlong of the Extreme. Those are his words. Now I just can't get out of my head the idea of Paul Heyman introducing Brock Lesnar as the Swinging Schlong of Suplex City. Joey Styles welcomes viewers to the show, and it's Tazz. He's getting ready for his match here against Jerry the King Lawler. Yes, you heard me. Tazz is going to be wrestling here tonight, so they say. Of course, these two commentators have a big war of words over the last several weeks. He did work a program where he went to the ECW arena in 1997 and everything, so he's definitely like a good symbol of like WWE's hatred or perceived hatred of ECW here, and he's reprising that role what he had in the late 90s. He shows up here to a chorus of boos from the ECW faithful. He walks up to Joey Styles and slaps him in the face. He gets in the ring and he and Tazz are facing off, but before they come to blows, Joey Styles jumps onto the King's back. Lawler goes to pile drive Styles, but then Tazz gets the Tazz mission locked in. Lawler passes out, and Tazz is the winner, and that's all she wrote. I give it 1 star out of 5. It was barely a match, but I think the moment that we saw this opening of the show was very strong. Tazz, obviously, he couldn't work an actual match anymore, so this is kind of the way they got around it. I think it was a really clever way to do it. I think it was a perfect setup here. It was a great way to start off the action on the night, like this very symbolic movement here of this anti-ECW guy getting choked out by someone who is like a big symbol and a big face of the history of the original ECW. And it's the last match Tazz ever had, and his first in several years after he initially retired. It's a nice way to go out for his career because he debuted for the company in Madison Square Garden, just a few blocks away from Manhattan Center, and here he is in this match with Jerry Lawler. And very, very big symbolism, good feelings here to start the show. Tazz joins Joey at the commentary desk for the rest of the evening. We then get a recap of the WWE and ECW head-to-head special from the week before, the big highlight of which being the Big Show betraying WWE to join ECW. We then go to our next match as Randy Orton takes on Kurt Angle, because when I think of ECW wrestling, I think of Randy Orton and Kurt Angle. But in all seriousness, the way they set this match up was Kurt Angle was declared the number one draft pick for ECW. He was basically assigned to ECW to help bolster its legitimacy and make it credible from the get-go. It's very ironic that Kurt is even a part of ECW, considering his humble beginnings in professional wrestling was like the year he won the gold medal in Atlanta. He was a guest at the ECW arena for a show of theirs. There's footage of this. He's there in the front row and everything. He even has an in-ring confrontation with Tazz at one point. But then what happens at that same show was Raven crucifies the Sandman, and Angle's a very religious man, and he took great offense to Sandman being crucified. So he walked out of the show, threatens to sue the company if they ever use his likeness or his footage for any of their promotional materials or anything like that. So that was Kurt Angle's first real exposure to professional wrestling before eventually getting signed by WWF in the late 90s and going on to do what he did. But this was the first instance of Angle in pro wrestling dealing with ECW. So now it's come full circle. Now he's supposed to be the hero of this new brand. Meanwhile, Randy Orton is fresh off a 60-day suspension for unprofessional conduct and having to stay at anger management counseling. He was written off TV back in April with an ankle injury courtesy of Angle, but he's back here, and that's what leads to this match. Orton makes his way to the ring, gets punched in the arm by a kid. That's a classic moment there. We get Pyro at ECW. The disrespect. Never thought we'd see the day. Orton getting some terrific reactions from the ECW fans here. Kurt's intro sees the debut of his short-lived other theme that they gave him to avoid the "You Suck" chants. Very underrated version of this theme, by the way. Orton fights his way out of the ankle lock early on, a loud break his ankle chant from these fans. Even though these guys are not ECW guys by any stretch, this is basically a WWE match, and that's all there is to it. But even though they aren't ECW guys, the fans are just 100% behind Angle as the babyface and as the hero of ECW, and they're 100% booing Randy Orton, and they're just very vocal. This is kind of a match, these are the kind of talent where, some hardcore ECW fans back in the day might have poo-pooed the entire thing. But because both guys are legitimate workers, that they wrapped up in it, and they're totally involved and engaged in this matchup, a recurring theme you'll see on this night. I mean, they're getting huge pops for basic chain wrestling, for God's sake. Orton keeps powdering out of the ring, the crowd chants pussy at him. Orton finally gets an advantage when Kurt runs his shoulder into the ring post by mistake. Chinlock applied by Orton here, and you get a massive boring chant. The fans just pounce on that immediately, which you knew they were going to do. I mean, Randy Orton at this time was definitely known as like Rest Hold Randy, yet Chinlock was one of the staples of every one of his matches, and people would piss on it because it's a rest hold or whatever, and this and that. And so for him to do that for a long time, the Chinlock, the fans chanting, boring, I mean, that makes total sense. Angle fights out of it and hits a German to a great pop. We get an EC dub chant. Awkward moment where Angle's going to follow through on hitting Orton from behind in order to get into position for the Germans. Orton counters out of the Angle slam with an arm drag, hits a drop kick. Angle blocks an RKO attempt. Orton hits a top rope crossbody. How often do we see him do that anymore? But Angle catches him in a roll-up and get a 2 count. More trading of finisher attempts. Kurt finally gets the ankle lock with the grapevine. Orton taps. Angle wins a hell of a contest. I give it 4.5 stars out of 5. This right out the gate. I mean, if you don't include Tazz and Jerry Lawler, as far as actual matches goes, this is a great opening shot here on the pay-per-view. These two work so well together, except for maybe one little slip-up that I noticed. Everything else, though, seems so crisp and so fluid. This was, ECW was known for a lot of things, one of which was their technical work rate emphasis. This was your, technical, your work rate quota filled for this match. But these two guys made it look so good. And again, I have to applaud the fans for buying into it. Like I said, neither of these guys were ECW guys at all. And so for the fans to embrace both guys in the match, I think is just a testament to their ability to work in the ring. Tag team match up next as Little Guido and Tony Mamaluke of the FBI take on Super Crazy and Tajiri. Mamaluke, last time we saw him on the channel, he was Tony Marinara in WCW. And Tajiri is back in the company for the first time since December of 2005. He's been working Hustle ever since he left the company. He's rocking the Hustle pants, by the way, here. But he's back for a one-night only appearance, get a big welcome back chant. chant for Tajiri here. Styles openly wonders how many Italian jokes he and Tazz can cram into this match. Tony Mamaluke has Super Crazy in a key lock. Tajiri just walks up and just stomps and break it up. No subtlety on the part of Tajiri. Tazz says he's glad Super Crazy left the lawnmower behind. That's a Mexicools reference. We got a Nacho Libre chant, which, okay. Some great strength by Super Crazy to lift Mamaluke out of the armbar. Tajiri and Little Guido each tag in, and the fans are just electric for it. All that chemistry and the history between the two of these guys. Little Guido counters a tilt-a-whirl backbreaker into a Fujiwara armbar. Love it. Double Tree of Woe, double basement drop kick. Tony and Little Guido try to make a run for it, but Super Crazy stops them. Acai moonsault onto both of them. Big Guido, the muscle for the FBI here, filling in for Sal Graziano. He yanks Super Crazy out of the ring, and the FBI get their licks in. Super Crazy with an interesting looking flapjack. He kind of hooks the leg as he comes down with it. Tony starts tying up Crazy in knots. Big drop kick to the mush by Guido, but Tajiri starts doing some kicks of his own. I love Guido's bump after getting hit in the knees. Tajiri tags in and is on the attack. Octopus stretch on Mamaluke. Tajiri flips, Tajiri kicks, and a do-si-do leads to double the tarantulas. Big Guido runs in, but Tajiri and Crazy drop kick him out of the ring. Guido drop kicks an upside down Super Crazy out of the ring. A big follow through over the barricade too. The FBI hit a double Fisherman Buster on Tajiri to win the match. Then after the bell rings though, the Big Show, the other new member of ECW, he shows up, takes Big Guido to Kick City, starts beating the hell out of all the competitors, just ragdolls Mamaluke. It's the first of many instances we'll see after the WWE ECW reign begins, where the established WWE guys really assert their will over the original ECW guys. Watching it back when I did this review, like, man, that is some just like hit you in the face symbolism there. And like, little did I know in 2006 that would be the recurring trend for the ECW program. As for the match itself, I give it 3 stars out of 5. I always will sit down and watch matches featuring, some combination of Little Guido, Super Crazy, and Tajiri. Those 3 have just amazing chemistry. Tony Mamaluke was good too. I like the action here, which is nice and fast paced, very just like, again, very solid, very hard-hitting stuff, entertaining matchup.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
This week's video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Guarantee instant online safety everywhere you go on all your devices with this virtual private network. Keep your passwords hidden and your private messages private. Running out of content to watch online? Just change the location of your server with Surfshark to access different websites and content libraries you can't get from your home base. Play online games with full privacy and security. Access games and features without restrictions and protect yourself from DDoS attacks.
It's a big help for when I'm playing video games.
Again, this seems wildly out of character for you. Support Wrestling with Regret. Go to the link below, use the promo code REGRET, and get Surfshark for 85% off and 3 extra months for free. Somebody hide the blue meanie because JBL's shown up on the balcony with a live microphone. And look, Rey Mysterio's there too. Oh wait, it's just a kid in a Rey mask. JBL says, "Don't you bring your backyard quality wrestling into my hometown of New York City," said the native Texan. We get a very vocal "you suck dick" chant, and JBL's comeback to this. It's not quite as legendary as Kurt Angle going, "Your mother taught me how," last year, but this was, I think, equally effective. He goes, "There's no women here, and you're chanting about a male organ. Who's the fruit booty?" Man, somebody call Stevie Ray and get him to sue. He talks about the fight he had the previous year in the ring with the blue meanie, the work that turned into a shoot. He says, "He was bleeding and he cried."
And bled and cried.
He talks about how former ECW guys made their names in WWE. He takes great offense to Tazz. "How dare you leave network television to go work sci-fi on Tuesdays?" This is how he announces he's going to return to the commentary desk on SmackDown for a bit. He tells the fans to kiss his ass, and he leaves. I think JBL did a very good job here, riling up the fans, building more of like the WWE versus ECW sentiment, and like trying to build ECW up as the baby faces. They're doing what they can here to really kind of just give, by JBL being there, even though he's running down ECW, in a way it's supposed to kind of like galvanize the fans of ECW, the ones to support it. So that, as far as that, I think they accomplished that for sure. In an Extreme Rules match, Rey Mysterio defends the World Heavyweight Championship against Sabu. Oh boy, the whirlwind that was Rey Mysterio's world title run in 2006. That was That sure was something, and I've talked about it before, and I don't really want to get into it right now, but let's just say Rey had an uphill battle on this night, because not only is there a growing anti-Rey Mysterio sentiment just from the WWE perspective, he's going against a big ECW legend, a mainstay in Sabu. And so, yeah, Rey's not getting the best reactions here. I brought up in my 05 review how he got booed a lot in his matchup, and I wondered why. And a lot of people pointed out that, well, he was more of like a WWE guy than an ECW guy. He wasn't there for very long. Also, when he did that match, One Night Stand 05, he was using like the West Coast Pop and the 619, these very WWE style moves. And so I guess the fans took great offense to that. Well, we're going to see a lot more of that in this match, kids. The match begins as Rey and Sabu each hold a steel chair with the introductions. We get some chair sword fighting to start things off. Air Sabu into the corner off the chair. Rey drop toe holds him into it though. Sabu dodges a 619 attempt and then he grabs the chair and just hucks it into Rey's face. Sabu produces a table, bridges it between the ring and the barricade. Rey moves off the table very early on, but it does not stop Sabu from just eating the barricade on the way down. Beautiful top rope moonsault by Rey. We get a kick out. The guillotine leg drop by Sabu and another kick out. The camel clutch is applied. That leads to a Sheik chant, reference to the original Sheik. Another table set up on the outside. Rey springboards off the ropes and does a big flying sit. The table explodes beneath them. A nice little sequence where Rey jumps off a chair, lands on the second rope when Sabu moves. He does a backflip into the ring, eats a leg lariat. Big Asai moonsault into the ring. Sabu landing leg first on Rey's face. Mysterio goes for another big sit, but Sabu moves. Rey landing crotch first on the chair, then gets his face bashed in with the chair flying at a very high velocity. Fighting on that table bridge that we saw earlier, Rey's on it. Sabu goes off the ropes, springboard DDT through the table, and holy hell, they just fall on top of each other in a big heap. Suddenly the referee gets down there, the medic shows up, the athletic commission guy in a very authoritative delivery says,
"No, they can't fight anymore. No, it's over."
And the match is thrown out, and the fans are heated about it, which, yeah, I mean, this is ECW. We've seen matches go on after a lot worse than what we saw from that table bump. Even though it was very impressive, it just flies in the face of the spirit of ECW. And they didn't say outright, this is not a nostalgia show. This is just this is our version of ECW now. They didn't really make it that clear, but this is their version of ECW, where you're going to have match stoppages and stuff like that. And it sucks. If there's one really negative thing you could say about this show, in my opinion, it's this moment here, where the match does not end conclusively. I would have rather seen Rey just win clean after a really competitive match. The match itself was great. I give it 2.5 stars out of 5, but it's not way down because of that terrible ending. The match itself leading up to it was fantastic. I would have loved to see it reach a natural conclusion. It's a shame we didn't get a proper rematch with these two for the championship. I think that, this did not do any favors for Rey's run as world champion. This was one of the many, many, many head-scratching decisions. And if there was a time for Rey to get a clean, legitimate, good-ass win as he was champion, which he didn't have a whole lot of during this run, this would have been a good time to do it. And yeah, Sabu losing wouldn't have been great, but spoiler alert, when you think of what happens at the end of the show, maybe Sabu losing clean wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world. Up next, Mick Foley and Edge versus Tommy Dreamer and the legend Terry Funk. Yes, they managed to lock the Funker down for this year's show. At WrestleMania 23, Foley and Edge wrestled in a hardcore match for the ages. Who could forget the iconic moment at the end where Edge spears Foley off the apron through a flaming table onto the floor. But then, not too long after that completely heated match at Backlash, they decide to join forces. Foley and Edge are working together, and Foley actually unretires the Hardcore Championship, so he and Edge are co-champions. Mick basically sells out and becomes a big WWE cheerleader in this process. As ECW is coming back up, he decides to decry ECW. It's kind of a spin on the anti-hardcore gimmick he had in the original ECW, where he was very pro WCW at the time. He had just come out from WCW, and so he was saying, enjoying, he was kissing Uncle Eric's ass in promos and decrying the hardcore nature of Tommy Dreamer in ECW. Kind of a modern spin on this one. We're basically the same kind of sentiment. He describes in a promo before the show, before this pay-per-view, Foley describes ECW as a sick, twisted whore. The idea that, he gave and he spilled so much blood and hurt himself so much, but ECW and the fans didn't care about him. And so he has this big axe to grind. I think it was really good promo work by Foley here. We also get, speaking of, this retread of the anti-hardcore angle that Foley had in ECW. They even repeated pretty much almost verbatim this promo between he and Terry Funk, where Funk would egg on Foley going, "Hey Foley, your mother's a whore." And then he's, finally the big tipping point in the original promo was, Eric Bischoff sucks. And then that would finally cause Foley to come to blows. In this version they did, in the modern thing, he goes, "WWE sucks." And that causes Foley to come to blows, the same thing. So it was kind of a nice little throwback to that. But heel Mick Foley at this point, to me, was really weird. How could you possibly boo this semi-retired, big, cuddly teddy bear? That's kind of how I saw Mick Foley as a long time. We were conditioned to believe that for many years, in the last couple of his years in his active run, and then his retirement after that. How could you boo Mick Foley? But I mean, he did a really good job. Like I said, his promo work was excellent here, some brilliant stuff. And I think that really helped get things over. He really made you believe what he felt about ECW here. Edge and Lita come out next, and Edge says this night's like Christmas to ECW fans, only their Santa Claus is Jewish, fat, bald, has an endless supply of bullshit. And then he goes, all these loser fans are going to tell their imaginary girlfriends how good the show was, then pleasure themselves to pictures of his girlfriend Lita on their loser internet. Even Lita gets some words in here. Dreamer and Funk show up, they're accompanied by Beulah McGillicuddy, Dreamer's wife, and Beulah says the trash coming out of Lita's mouth is as bad as the stuff she puts in it. Ooh, salacious. Challenges them to a 6-person match. Dreamer out wrestling Edge at the start. Foley and Funk are tagged in. Funk slaps Foley around. Foley wants to leave, but the Funker stops him. A brawl breaking out on the outside. Dreamer and Funk work over their opponents with some plunder. Edge just bends a cookie sheet around the head of Dreamer. As Funk and Foley brawl near the stage, Edge dinks Dreamer in the head with a ladder, goes for a spear, but Dreamer hip tosses it into the ladder. Funk then grabs the ladder. It's a ladder copter spot. Then he goes to climb it, presumably for some kind of moonsault where he'll kill himself, where Edge tilts the ladder over and Funk crashes and burns. Dreamer goes for the Dreamer driver on Edge, but Lita takes him to Dick Kick City, and we get our first "She's a Crack Whore" chant. Foley and Edge produce a giant piece of plywood with barbed wire attached to it. They dump it onto Dreamer. They pull it off him. It looks as painful as hell. They pick it up again, but Funk trips them up. Edge takes the edge of the board to the face, and Foley gets some barbed wire hooked to him. We get a "We Want Fire" chant. Foley is driven back first into the board in the corner. Foley shoving the board into Funk's face. Lita produces more barbed wire from under the ring, and Foley wraps it around his arm. He just digs it into Funk's face here. It looks so brutal, and Funk really just brings it over the top the way he sells it, screaming about his eye. "My eye! Oh, goddamn, my eye, Mick!" There's a "You sick fuck" chant. The combination of Foley with the violence and Funk's selling really puts us over. The medics take Funk out of there, and he leaves ringside. Foley gets out the barbed wire baseball bat. Couple of shots in on Dreamer. Beulah reaching out for a tag as if that's something she needs to worry about at this point. There's been no tags here. Foley gets out Mr. Sacco and puts the mandible claw on Beulah, then on Dreamer, sets up for a spear. The heels corner Beulah and Edge, torturing her with some suggestive holds. The Funker comes back, and he's all bandaged up and has a barbed wire 2x4. Dreamer with a double low blow, and Funk begins to swing the 2x4. Funk's got a hard time lighting the 2x4 on fire, but he finally gets it done, hits Foley with it. Foley falls backward into the barbed wire board, breaks it in half. Funk gets knocked into Foley by Edge. Dreamer wraps some barbed wire around Edge's throat. That's very graphic looking. Lita makes the save, but Beulah fights back, and we get a cat fight, as Joey Styles would say. Dreamer picks up Lita and hits her with the Dreamer driver, but then Edge with the Edge-O-Matic with the barbed wire assist. Beulah checks on her husband. Edge hits her with a spear, a very suggestive and very sleazy pin, and the baddies win. Funk's all caught up in the barbed wire. It looks so nasty they have to free him with wire cutters, but that is how this hellacious war comes to an end. This one gets 4.5 stars out of me. I'm rating this the same rating I gave the Angle Orton match. These are two extremely different matches, no pun intended, but they're very, very different from each other. But I think they each do a great job in just telling this really engaging story with their bodies and their body language. Again, Terry Funk, the way he sold that, getting gigged in the face with the barbed wire, that's what put it over the top for me, just that emotion from him. And it's like the crowd being into it as they were. I'm not a huge fan of death matches by rule, but what I saw here, I really enjoyed just the physicality and, again, the story and the emotion that was invoked here. Getting the ladies involved sporadically too, I don't think it took away from it. I think it added more to it. And then making it like a 6-person tag officially, I thought, helped kind of make it more legitimate as far as like they're not just like jumping in and interfering and ruining the flow of a spot. Like they're there and they're there for a reason. And this is a fantastic match. It's a very violent and bloody affair if you can handle it. But man, it's so good. Up next, Balls Mahoney taking on former ECW champion Masato Tanaka, who last year in the same building tore the house down with Mike Awesome. The match begins fairly technical given who we're seeing here, kind of a surprise. Mahoney with the advantage early on, he lights Tanaka up with some punches that the crowd is very into. Tanaka grabs a chair but then balls the dodge. Back in the ring, a superplex by Masato. Mahoney fights back and we get a superplex of his own. There's some chair fighting leading to a big old dink to the head of Tanaka. Mahoney pins and wins. I give it 1.5 stars out of 5. This match was a lot more competitive and engaging than I thought it was going to be, but there still wasn't much to it. I mean, I will say the intensity and the aggression they have from bell to bell is just like, it's ratcheted way up. They're like not taking breaks at all here. They're just going hell for leather, and it's really impressive. But like I said, it's pretty short, and there's not much we can build off that. We're about to get our main event of the evening, but first, a wild Eugene appears. Old young master Eugene Dinsmore makes his way to the Hammerstein Ballroom, and the fans don't care much for him. Eugene on the mic says Uncle Eric used to tell him he was as smart as an ECW fan. And he goes, "Are you saying boo or you for Eugene?" He's reading his poem about ECW. It's super cheesy, and all of a sudden we get this like jump cut to a very intense Sandman who's sitting in the crowd. He does his whole entrance, makes his way through the crowd. Eugene just wants a hug, but Sandman cracks a Singapore cane over his head. Sandman chases Eugene out of the arena, and that's where we leave that. This whole skit with Sandman and Eugene, I think it was silly, it was entertaining, and this would actually be the beginning of the running gag they'd have in the first several weeks of ECW's run on Sci-Fi, where Sandman would just show up and beat up random silly characters as a way to kind of poke fun at Sci-Fi, because that makes a lot of sense. Like, Sandman would beat up, Nacho Libre, and of course the ECW Zombie. Just great times, right? Main event time, WWE Championship match as John Cena goes into very unfriendly territory to defend against Rob Van Dam, the heart and soul of ECW. Back at WrestleMania, RVD won the Money in the Bank briefcase, and he became the first man to officially pick a date for his title match rather than being sneaky about it and jumping somebody after a match or a beatdown. This is going to be the first time this championship has been defended in an ECW event, as bastardized of an ECW event as it is, and RVD says that if he wins, the WWE Championship will become the ECW World Title. As you might expect, RVD gets a huge ovation for his entrance, and well, not the same for John Cena. And this is no mixed reaction like what he gets in more traditional WWE arenas. This is pure, unadulterated, 100% hatred for this man. It is just obscene in more ways than one. I mean, think of where we are in history at this point. It's 2006. It is the height of the Super Cena push, and there's already this growing anti-Cena resentment at the live shows for WWE. So imagine what's going to happen when you take a bunch of like these smart hardcore fans in New York City and put them in this very small, packed, hot venue, and they all get a bone to pick with the man, John Cena, against their boy, Rob Van Dam. What did you think was going to happen? And it makes it a more interesting experience to watch. To hear such passionate fans on either side of the spectrum is just refreshing, especially, God, watching empty arena shows right now in 2020 and then going back to see 2,500 people, which is not a huge number for a WWE event, but for them to just raining hellfire down on Cena is just something to behold there. He gets all the middle fingers, gets all the fuck you Cena chants. There's the famous "if Cena wins, we riot" sign. That has just been immortalized by now. Cena throws his shirt out into the crowd. They keep throwing it back. I love the one guy who spits on the shirt repeatedly, goes to throw their shirt, but just lands on some people. They're covered in his spit now. The bell finally rings. Toilet paper flies into the ring. The "fuck you Cena" chant. "You can't wrestle" chant. Tazz going, "Well, he can't wrestle, but he damn sure can fight, Cole." Very similar to Booker T's with limited skills and abilities line many years later. Here's the thing. These two don't really have to do anything in this matchup, because by this point the 2,500 people are just frothing at the mouth. They're in the palm of their hand. They could sit in the ring for 5 minutes and pick their nose. They'd get a "this is awesome" chant from these guys. It's so volatile, and it's so passionate what we're feeling from the fans here. And yeah, I mean, they're putting in the work. RVD and Cena are not resting on their laurels here. They're wrestling pretty competitively throughout, but yeah, they don't have to, but they're doing it, and it's making the crowd just feed into it more. RVD has the advantage early on, but Cena's very powerful, hits a power slam and clotheslines RVD out of the ring. The fans chant same old shit, to which Cena immediately goes to the top rope and dives to the outside. RVD with a moonsault on the outside, grabs a chair, but Cena cuts him off. There's a tight squeeze between the ring and the barricade as RVD crashes into the cameraman. RVD leaps onto the barricade, but Cena shoves him onto the floor. They fight in the crowd. That's a risky proposition. RVD with a corkscrew leg drop onto Cena on the barricade and a guillotine leg drop on the apron. RVD using all his greatest hits here. The drop kick into the corner with the chair, rolling thunder, Cena still kicks out. RVD goes to the split-legged moonsault, but Cena puts up the chair and is back on the offensive. An ugly looking DDT though. I was very scared for RVD's neck watching this. Slingshot into the corner and RVD Porky Pigs his way through another chair. Now Cena busts out some of his moves of doom. The first AA attempt is thwarted though. RVD tries his best to get Cena draped onto the top rope, but they can't quite pull it off. There's some miscommunication there. Walks right into the STFU. RVD grabs the rope. Cena does not want to let go. He gets into it with the referee and decks him. Cena whomps Rob with some steel steps. In comes Nick Patrick from SmackDown to make the count, but RVD kicks out. Just the visual of Nick Patrick at an ECW show is just that's the most mind-melting kind of thing, because Nick Patrick you associate with like old school WCW, and he's like the oldest, stodgiest kind of referee I can think of. When I think of like goofy old school referees, like Patrick's kind of my visualization when I see it. So for him to be anywhere in the vicinity of an ECW ring makes me laugh. Cena dumps RVD out of the ring. Suddenly a man in a trench coat and a biker helmet comes out from under the ring, spears Cena through the table, and knocks out the ref. It's Edge, the man Cena beat at the Royal Rumble for the championship, not letting Cena forget. As Edge walks away, RVD surveys the situation, hits the 5-star frog splash onto Cena. Paul Heyman runs into the ring, makes a 3 count, which I guess counts here. RVD pins Cena, winning the championship. He celebrates in the crowd, hugs his wife, the locker room empties out, big ol' celebration, and the fans go home happy as we fade to black. You know, given who's in this matchup, it only makes sense to give it a 5-star rating. The wrestling itself may not be like 100% S-tier spectacular, but the story and the setting and the reactions and the outcome and the moments make this an insanely memorable match. Just a very, very cathartic feeling that I don't think fans would feel again until like 5 years later when CM Punk beat Cena at Money in the Bank 2011. It's crazy to think this one moment here may not have been possible if RVD didn't pitch the idea of One Night Stand to Vince McMahon back in 2005. And I guess for helping the company bring all this business and buy rates and everything, giving him the championship's the least they could do. But I mean, I think RVD, him being the champion was a long time coming. I felt really upset that, he never got that due in like 2001, 2002, during the invasion storyline and the post-invasion time, when I think his stock was at its highest in a long time. And so for him to finally get it here in 2006, I thought it was a bit late, but I still think it was very much deserved. I think RVD, again, winning in this environment, it was so poetic. It was such a good feeling after, again, the raw passion and anger of the ECW fans toward John Cena and the elation they feel when RVD wins in a good match. I'm not artificially inflating the stars because of the moment. The match itself was also very good, but the setting just makes it that much better, and the context makes it that much better. So instead of them changing the name of the championship to the ECW World Title like they promised, instead Paul Heyman just hands Rob the original ECW championship. RVD says he wants to keep the spinner belt as well because, in his words, this one spins. Fair enough of a reason, I guess. So he is a double champion for a bit, and for lack of a better phrase, he's riding high. Unfortunately, this push would come to an ass-grinding halt soon after the Vengeance pay-per-view, when RVD and Sabu are pulled over while they're on the road and they're arrested for drug possession. And so that kills the push right quick. He drops the ECW title of the Big Show after Paul Heyman turns heel on him. He drops the WWE title to Edge, and so then after that he's suspended for 30 days, and he's never given a shot in that main event scene ever again. So unfortunately, it's really too bad. That's just a pure, joyful, wholesome moment is what we saw at the end of One Night Stand 2006. ending, the reign that is, ending in such a disappointing fashion. My final grade for ECW One Night Stand 2006 is an A-. I'm grading it just below One Night Stand 05, which I give an A to. I think that 05 is the better One Night Stand show of the two of them, but this one is still very good. It's very memorable, very enjoyable, a lot of fun to watch. If the biggest transgression on this show is Rey Mysterio and Sabu, the ending of that matchup, after everything they went through leading up to that, I think it's okay. When you think of like how everything else shakes down on this show, like how the main event ends and how just positive that feels, I think that kind of cancels out the negativity brought on by the Rey Mysterio Sabu thing. Even though the Rey Mysterio thing, that's a whole separate issue. But I think it's still, so much good. There's so much good going for this show here, and even though it's not, what you would see on ECW on Sci-Fi is nothing like what you would see from this show. And I think that they sold us a bill of goods with One Night Stand 06. The rest of ECW's run could not live up to this, unfortunately. If you look at like ECW One Night Stand 2006 to ECW December to Dismember 2006, it's night and day. You'd wonder, how were we hoodwinked to believe that it'd be anything like what we saw in the Hammerstein Ballroom? That being said, though, just on the whole, this show is just terrific. There's a lot of fan service, not as much as 05, but still there's some there, and it works. The fact that the fans, these hardcore ECW fans, embrace the guys who are from WWE for the most part, except for John Cena and maybe a little bit of Rey Mysterio, I think that's a great indicator of how well done this show turned out. Well, I hope you enjoyed my review of One Night Stand 2006. If you want to play a role in determining which shows I look at, be they good, bad, or somewhere in between, go to patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret, become a $10 backer or above, and you'll have the chance to nominate classic shows for me to review. Next time, you know what? We saw a classic ECW show, an original ECW show. We saw WWE's interpretation of ECW in 2006. Let's jump a few more years into the future, when TNA decided, what happens if we take the exact same concept and do it as our own? It's Hardcore Justice 2010. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.
And I don't deserve to be forgiven for the insensitive comments I made to Mr. Turner, for the foolish behavior I showed to my dearest Uncle Eric. I deserve to deal in the depths of this hell on earth that you call ECW.